So welcome to part 3 of the Energy House workshop, where we're going to discuss ventilation. My name's Anika, I'm from Carbon Co-op, and I'm here with my colleague Rachel.
Hi everyone.
Who's my participant for the session. So we've talked about how heat's lost from the home and how we can stop heat being lost from the home. But what we haven't spoken about yet, which is vitally important, is ventilation. A term that, if you could remember from this part, is seal tight and ventilate right. It's a really key issue. So we're going to have a little bit of a look at why by watching this video together, and then we're going to take some questions from Rachel. So I'll just make a start.
Worried about damp and mould? Don't panic. Help is at hand. First off, we need to understand what the problem is. Damp and mould are caused by an excess of moisture and can create problems for our health and for our buildings. However, just like our bodies, we need some moisture in our houses in order for them to function well. So we need a balanced amount of moisture to keep a healthy home. Moisture can create problems in your home through the many forms water can take. When water freezes, it expands into solid ice, which can burst uninsulated pipework. Liquid water from leaks or flooding can lead to damp in the floors or walls. If your guttering becomes blocked, then rainwater can overflow, saturating your walls in specific areas, sometimes even leaking through to the inside. But the most important form we want to discuss here is water as a gas, water vapour. Whilst we're all used to the sight of steam from a boiling kettle, most water vapour is not so easy to spot. There is always water vapour in the air around us. We produce it when we breathe, along with any animals or plants in our home, and also through daily activities such as cooking and washing. If there was no water vapour in the air, then nothing would be able to live. Okay, so here's the technical bit. At different temperatures, air can hold different amounts of water vapour. The warmer the air is, the more moisture it can hold, known as its holding capacity. But when there is more water vapour than can be held by the air, it becomes full up and condenses into liquid water. Outside of your home, this is how rain is formed. This also happens when warm, moisture-rich air meets a cold surface, like a single glazed window in your home during winter. Condensation forms as the air suddenly cools against the surface and the holding capacity of the air is reduced. Because air can hold different amounts of moisture at different temperatures, we measure how full the air is by something called relative humidity. If we have 100% relative humidity, then the air is full up and the vapour becomes liquid water. But even when there is no condensation, high relative humidity can be uncomfortable and lead to mould and other problems. At the other end of the scale, air with 0% relative humidity is excessively, and in fact impossibly dry and uninhabitable. We need a relative humidity of somewhere between 40% and 65% for most of the time for the building atmosphere to be pleasant and healthy. So we come back to balance. Not too dry and not too moist. Where does the moisture in your house come from? Outside of the home, the most obvious answer is rain. Good construction is vital to avoid water entering a building from the roof, walls and windows, along with suitable ground drainage in the case of flooding. Inside, we have our direct uses of water in our daily lives, washing and drying clothes, cooking and bathing. All these produce visible liquid water and large amounts of not so visible water vapour. Next, we have the organisms within the home. Human, animal and plant. All of us produce water vapour as we breathe, or plant breathe. If the number of people, pets or plants changes, the balance of moisture within your home may change dramatically. Remember how hot and humid the air gets at busy parties. But you didn't have a problem before. What's changed? For damp and mould to appear in your home, you need an excess of moisture, visible or not, that leads to an imbalance. What has changed? Has something stopped working? Has the weather changed? Or have you changed the way you live? Or have you made improvements to your home? Home improvements need attention to detail, and sometimes they can put things out of balance. For example, Improving windows or insulation is great for heat retention, but if the installation leaves gaps, it can create colder areas called cold bridges, where the moisture can condense and mould can grow. If you draft-proof your home but ventilation is not also considered, then moisture levels can rise and push the house out of balance. So a good ventilation strategy is needed. Different types of building in different locations need different approaches in order to maintain balance. Older buildings deal with moisture in a different way to newer ones, so require a different approach when renovations or changes are made. Buildings in windy, wet places often have different kinds of materials and design. If we don't take these into account when we change things, we can end up creating more problems. What to do about it? There's a lot to think about, but the key is to hold on to the idea of balance. The balance between the water, outside and in, your house, and your activities. Firstly, understand your building and how it was designed to work and stay healthy. Try to understand the building as a whole, fabric, services, occupants, and its context, as all these factors are connected. Try to stop any excess water getting into your home, from the roof, windows, walls, or foundations, and also the internal plumbing. Check for leaks, missing tiles on the roof, broken seals around windows, and cracks in the render. This is obvious, but not always straightforward. Simple maintenance is always a good starting point. Try to reduce the excess moisture from your activities within the home, for example, by keeping lids on pans or drying clothes outside. This is not always easy in winter or if you have limited space, but do what you can. Finally, make sure the water vapour generated in your home stays at a healthy level through proper heating to increase the holding capacity in the air, and good ventilation to get rid of excess vapour. Try to understand your home's ventilation system if it has one. This can mean opening windows when you know an excess of vapour is being created. It's easier to heat your house if it's well insulated, of course, but remember that a consistent approach should be taken so that you don't have an imbalance of warm and cold surfaces. One more thing. Don't worry about little bits of damp or mould, particularly around windows or in showers and bathrooms. It's quite normal, especially in extreme weather conditions. Sometimes there is not much you can do except wipe the water or mould away. Just keep an eye on things and ask an expert if you're not sure. To learn more about the causes of damp and the balance of actions, check out our tool here. Living in a balanced home is good for the health of the building, its occupants, and their wallets.
I really like that video because it sort of pulls together lots of what we've talked about in terms of understanding the whole house, how it works, making sure you can, any changes you make to it, improve the health of your home. And one part of that is ventilation. Another part of that is keeping it well heated, maintaining it well, considering how all the different materials are installed. There's more information on ventilation in healthy homes, and I'll point to a webinar that can help with that. But for now, do you have any questions, Rachel?
Yeah, I enjoyed that video, and it did make me think. We've got a room in our house actually that's we've just noticed like patches of damp on the wall, and I know that we use it for like drying our clothes, and we don't often put the heating on in that room, so I kind of understand where we might be going wrong. But we've got a window in that room, but not a kind of air vent, and I wondered what the air vents versus windows, and what kind of level of control or how which one does what in terms of like balancing it, that like concept of balancing the percentage of water.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think a lot of people, I realised after learning a lot about this stuff that where you dry your clothes has a massive impact on your home. So where I used to live, we always used to dry our clothes in the hallway, and the house always felt really damp. And so I insisted that we don't really have much of a garden, so I insisted we get a dryer, which not everyone thinks is environmental or can afford, but for us we could, and it made a huge difference. I think considering where you dry your clothes is really important. And as you say, if you dry it in one room, I I often suggest to people if they can't dry their clothes outside, then it makes sense to dry them in one room and keep the door shut. You could even, if you wanted to really go for it. Put sort of door seals around the door to make sure none of the humidity or the sort of extra moisture from those clothes gets into the rest of the house. But then that room really does need to be ventilated, and that could be as simple as opening the window. Your question about whether to use air vents or not. So I think with ventilation, it's really important to think about it as a system and your whole house, and kind of how you can make sure that air moves is exchanged in the whole of your house. So an important part of ventilation is to make sure you keep the relative humidity correct. So as you saw in the video, try and, you can get hydrometers, which you can actually monitor yourself, the relative humidity. They're fairly cheap. You can get them from, most DIY shops or online. And they tell you what the relative humidity is. So you can make sure yourself that, you're keeping it between 40 and 65. And if it goes above 70, kind of think about why that is. So that's one important reason to ventilate the house well, to get rid of the excess moisture. But there are other reasons to ventilate. So if you've got you've painted, like there can be off-gassing of chemicals from new carpets or sofas, different types of paint you might not have used the low VOC paint. There's other, cleaning products and things like that. They can leave lots of pollutants, like indoor pollutants in our air, and you want to exchange all of that. So the reason I'm going into all of that is it's more than thinking about, should I put an air vent in this room? But thinking about the whole house and thinking sort of, how does air flow through my house, and how do I make sure I can control it so I don't lose too much of the heat, but it's enough air movement to make sure the air inside your home is fresh, and you can get rid of pollutants as well as extra moisture. And then there's a lot to think about when you get to that point, but we do a whole hour and a half webinar on this topic, and we'll signpost it underneath this video so that you can have a look at it yourself. And the first half of that video goes into all the health aspects around indoor air quality and why it's important to maintain it well. And the second half of the video is all about different kinds of ventilation systems and how to, which ones might be more appropriate for your home, what the considerations are. So hopefully that's helped to answer your question. I went into a bit more detail than maybe I needed to, but hopefully that helps.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. That gives me a good idea of like what the purpose of ventilation is, more than just moisture. Thank you.
Do you have any other questions?
I was also going to ask. So I was living in a flat before on like the top floor, and that video made me think in terms of like balancing moisture, whether when you live in a flat, what impact the other homes have on your situation, or if it's not something you need to consider.
I don't know lots about that, but I can imagine if it's a top floor flat of a home where there's lots of suspended timber floors, so rather than a concrete flat, there might be lots of air movement that will come up from the downstairs. So then, in terms of indoor air quality and health, I don't know, if the people downstairs are smokers, you might smell smoke, or if they don't ventilate their flats properly, you might get lots of their warm and moist air in your flat. I guess the main thing to do then would have been to monitor your situation, to check what the relative humidity is and then deal with it yourself. And then you could also potentially seal up the gaps between the floorboards, or or ask for some advice around how to make your flat airtight. Flats are, I guess, multi-story buildings, and flats are more complex because you have to think about the factors of the people around you. But there's always, you can always ask for advice from Carbon Co-op or others to try to get answers to your questions and things like that.
That's great, thank you.
Great, so I think we'll leave it there. I hope you've enjoyed these 3 Energy House workshops, and I think we'll have some more sessions on heating and solar and different types of ways that you can make your home more energy efficient and low carbon. Thanks again, and see you next time.